We have been married for 9 happy years. I know this to be true even if he ended up cheating on me last night. My husband Ben doesn't have many friends, but lately he's been hanging out with a coworker named Al, who is recently divorced. I have never had any problems with their relationship, which has generally consisted of a couple of drinks and coming home before 12. Our relationship has been, up until now, one of complete trust. I'll stick to just the facts from last night, 10:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. I'm at home watching Disney Plus, followed by bed. Ben is hanging out with just Al at a dive bar, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. They moved the party over to the strip club. We've never had a discussion about whether either of us finds strip clubs disrespectful, so this is a gray area. However, staying out this late on a Tuesday is not something he's ever done before. 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. They Uber to Al's house. Ben says it was just the two of them in the vehicle. 4:02 a.m. I called 20 minutes before this as I was worried, but no answer. This time there's a pickup, but I don't say hello because I can hear women's voices. Immediately I become apprehensive and think this must be an accidental pickup. There is some distortion, so I can't really hear what the women are saying. But then, very clearly, an energetic male voice cuts in with, "This weenie isn't going to suck itself." A woman's voice follows, and eventually there's a hang-up on the other end. His side. Ben maintains that the voice I heard was Al's. Al supposedly came upstairs with strippers from the club to find Ben, who was hiding out on the rooftop patio, sleeping, and roped him into joining in on the fun. Al woke Ben up with his loudness, and then Ben noticed I was calling him, so he picked up. He didn't say anything because he was drunk and disoriented from waking up, and his buddy was trying to solicit intimacy, so polite. He thought it was a bad connection and hung up. I think all this sounds like nonsense and have been furiously Googling divorce lawyers since. But I also wanted to get a sanity check here first before I actually do anything. I can't ask anybody in my life because my friends and family will probably judge him for going to the strip club and make a judgment then and there. Ben is white and thinks strip clubs are not a big deal. I was so sure at the time, but now in the cold light of day, I can't say for certain whether the voice was Ben's or Al's, whom I've never actually met. Ben is a huge nerd whose passions include Star Wars and wildlife photography. He doesn't really exude, "come suck this weenie" energy. While he admits he made a lot of bad choices last night, he vehemently maintains he never cheated. He could never cheat because he loves me, etc. He let me go through his phone, but he is a technologist, and I wouldn't find anything if he didn't want me to. So I asked if he would be okay if I put a tracking app on his phone and forbade him from seeing Al anymore. He agreed with no hint of protest, and he hates being ordered around. I'm tired, sad, and angry. Should I ask for marriage counseling first? What's there even to talk about if the issue is whether he cheated on me or not? You did. No, I didn't. I don't actually want to be his warden for the rest of my life. How does trust recover? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. His friend didn't bring 2 women home just for himself. There are 2 women because your husband was sleeping with one. His behavior was unusual, he didn't come home, you hear multiple women on the phone, and the only 2 guys present are your husband and Al. He will never tell you the truth. He will lie and manipulate his way out of it. And someone who can cheat on you does not love you. You can't do that to someone you love. I would definitely divorce him. Also, just because he's nerdy doesn't mean he can't be more assertive in bed and use dirty talk. It's likely that he thinks you're not interested and therefore doesn't express it towards you. I've encountered many men who were like that. You were so certain it was his voice on the phone, but as time passes, you're convincing yourself otherwise because you don't want to believe it. Trust your initial thoughts. Comment 2. You won't find answers on his phone. Look at his credit cards and bank account for the financial transactions on the day in question. The amount of money spent will give you the answer. Prostitutes require payment. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments from my last post. So, it's been a week since that night, and things have only gotten more complicated. After my initial post, I decided to confront Ben again. I needed to know more about what happened that night, so I asked him to recount every detail. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and tried to fill in the gaps, but something still felt off. He mentioned that Al had been going through a rough patch and that he just wanted to be there for his friend. I wanted to believe him, but the nagging doubt wouldn't go away. The next day, I decided to take a more proactive approach. I called Al. I figured if Ben was telling the truth, Al would back up his story. Al was surprisingly open and confirmed most of what Ben had said. He admitted to bringing the strippers back to his place and waking Ben up. He even apologized for the whole situation, saying it was all his fault and that Ben was just an innocent bystander. But something about his tone made me uneasy. It felt rehearsed, like they had coordinated their stories. Later that evening, I decided to check Ben's phone again. This time, I found a text message from Al that Ben had missed. It was from the night in question and read, "Thanks for covering for me, man. I owe you one." My heart sank. Why would Al need to thank Ben for covering for him if everything was as innocent as they claimed? I confronted Ben with the text, and he looked genuinely shocked. He swore he had no idea what Al was talking about and suggested that maybe Al was just trying to be nice. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I decided to dig deeper. I started by looking into Al's background. I found out that his divorce was messy, involving infidelity on his part. This made me even more suspicious. If Al was capable of cheating on his wife, what was stopping him from dragging Ben into his mess? I also found out that Al had a reputation at work for being a bit of a party animal, which didn't align with Ben's usual behavior. I decided to follow Ben one night when he said he was going out with Al again. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to see for myself what was going on. I followed them to a different bar this time, and everything seemed normal at first. They were just having drinks and talking. But then, around midnight, I saw them leave with two women. My heart was pounding as I followed them to a nearby hotel. I waited outside for what felt like hours. Finally, Ben came out alone, looking disheveled. I confronted him right there in the parking lot. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. He tried to explain that the women were just friends of Al's and that nothing happened. But I couldn't believe him anymore. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. The next day, I told Ben I needed some space and went to stay with my sister. I needed time to think and figure out what to do next. While I was there, I got a call from Al. He was furious, accusing me of ruining his friendship with Ben and making tense accusations. He said that Ben had told him everything and that I was being paranoid. This only made me more certain that something was going on. I decided to talk to a divorce lawyer. I needed to know my options and what steps I should take if I decided to end things with Ben. The lawyer was very understanding and gave me a lot of useful information. But the whole process was overwhelming. I never thought I would be in this position, questioning my marriage and considering divorce. While I was at my sister's, I had a lot of time to think about our relationship. I remembered how we met in college and how we bonded over our shared love of Star Wars and wildlife photography. Ben was always the nerdy, sweet guy who made me laugh. But now, I was seeing a different side of him, one that I didn't recognize. I also thought about my own insecurities and how they might be affecting my judgment. Growing up, my parents had a tumultuous relationship filled with infidelity and mistrust. I always promised myself that I would never end up like them. But here I was, facing the same issues. I wondered if I was projecting my fears onto Ben and seeing things that weren't really there. But then I remembered the text message from Al and the hotel incident. Those were real, tangible pieces of evidence that I couldn't ignore. I felt like I was stuck in a nightmare, unable to wake up. I decided to give Ben one last chance to come clean. I told him that if he was honest with me, we could try to work things out. But if he continued to lie, I would have no choice but to end our marriage. He looked me in the eyes and swore that he had told me everything. But I could see the doubt in his eyes, the hesitation. I knew he was still hiding something. So here I am, a week later, still unsure of what to do. I love Ben, but I don't know if I can ever trust him again. The thought of going through a divorce is terrifying, but so is the idea of staying in a marriage filled with lies and deceit. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and no matter which path I choose, I'm going to lose something important. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for confronting my husband about his AI-generated wedding vows and his secretive coffee dates with an old friend? My husband, 36-year-old man, and I just got married a few months ago, but we've been together for 8 years. We opted to have a small wedding, and it was a very beautiful ceremony with just our close family and friends. When my husband read his vows, I remember thinking that it sounded very formal and not at all like how he usually speaks. But I chalked that up to him taking the time to think out his vows and make them sound the best he could. They were really nice and made me cry, and everyone else seemed to think so too. Fast forward to today, I went on our shared ChatGPT account, we were using it for work, to cancel our membership since we didn't need it anymore. I happened to see something titled Vows and clicked on it. Lo and behold, there it was. His vows 100% verbatim. I saw the prompt he provided and it had all of the major themes that were in the vows. But he literally just copied and pasted the generated text and read it like it was his own words. I remember telling him after the ceremony how sweet his vows were, and he said that he meant every word he said. Now I just feel stupid, honestly. Anyone who knows me well knows that I value these kinds of things above all else. My friends and I joke that they never really need to get me an actual gift, because a card means so much more to me. I spent quite a bit of time writing my vows to him, and it really stings that he just threw a prompt into ChatGPT and tried to pass it off as his own. To me, these words are some of the most important that we will ever say to each other. I feel so sad knowing that they weren't even his own. Would something like this bother you? How do I approach him about this? On the one hand, I am really upset about it, but on the other, I don't want to embarrass him or start a fight over it. I'm just really hurt and could use any advice about how to approach this. Now for an update. Thank you all for your perspectives and advice on this. It really helped me collect my thoughts and see his side before even talking to him. I let him know that I found the vow and we talked about it. He was very understanding that it upset me because he copied it verbatim, and he explained that he just wanted them to be perfect, along the lines of what a lot of you said. I definitely understand that, and I feel way better about it now. While I'm still not a fan of AI vows, I think life is too short to have resentment about these kinds of things. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I have a very good friend to whom words of affirmation come very easily. I have similar thoughts regarding my friend, but the words never come to me at the moment, and feel unnatural to say at a later time. Poignant, deep thoughts about feelings just don't turn into words comfortably for me. It doesn't mean I care any less if the words don't spontaneously occur. Likewise, I have no intention of ever having a wedding ceremony, let alone one that had custom handwritten vows. It just is not me to put my private thoughts and feelings on public display for an audience. The whole idea of doing so would be mortifying. Then again, you and I are not in a relationship, as we would be incompatible. Maybe your spouse loves you, but just does not have the same capacity for expression that you have. Comment 2. I'm just giving you another scenario to think about. It might be best just to ask him. He realized the importance of making a perfect speech for you, knew that the type of wonder a woman expects at a wedding was beyond his ability, and took the time to use all resources available to make sure you were as happy as possible. If this happens to be his thinking, then he sounds like an awesome hubby. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After our conversation about the vows, things seemed to settle down for a bit. We went back to our usual routines, and I tried to put the whole AI vows thing behind me. But then, about 2 weeks later, I noticed my husband was acting a bit off. He was more distant and seemed preoccupied. I initially thought it was just work stress, but it became clear that something else was going on. One evening, I found him sitting in the dark in our living room, staring at his phone. When I asked him what was wrong, he hesitated before finally admitting that he had been in contact with an old friend from college. This friend, who I'll call Jay, had reached out to him on social media. They had a complicated history, and I knew they had been close before we got together. My husband assured me that it was just friendly catching up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. A few days later, I noticed he was texting Jay more frequently. I confronted him about it, and he insisted that it was harmless. He even showed me some of their conversations, which seemed innocent enough. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and let it go, hoping that it was just my insecurities getting the best of me. However, things took a turn for the worse when I found out that my husband had met up with Jay for coffee without telling me. I only discovered this because I saw a receipt from a cafe that we never go to. When I confronted him about it, he admitted that he had met up with Jay, but insisted that it was just a friendly catch-up. He apologized for not telling me and promised that it wouldn't happen again. Despite his assurances, I couldn't help but feel betrayed. I started to question everything, including our relationship. I began to wonder if there was something more going on between them. My husband noticed my growing unease and tried to reassure me, but the damage was already done. Our trust had been shaken, and it was hard to rebuild. Around this time, I also started to notice other changes in his behavior. He was more secretive with his phone, often taking it with him even when he went to the bathroom. He also started working late more frequently, claiming that he had a lot of deadlines to meet. I wanted to believe him, but the doubts kept creeping in. One evening, I decided to check his phone while he was in the shower. I know it was a breach of trust, but I felt like I had no other choice. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were messages between him and Jay that were far from innocent. They were talking about their past, reminiscing about old times, and even flirting. My heart sank as I read through the messages, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. When he came out of the shower, I confronted him with the messages. He was initially defensive, but when he saw how hurt I was, he broke down and admitted that he had developed feelings for Jay again. He insisted that nothing physical had happened, but the emotional betrayal was enough to shatter me. I felt like my world was falling apart. We decided to take some time apart to figure things out. He moved in with a friend for a while, and I stayed in our apartment. During this time, I did a lot of soul searching and tried to understand how we had gotten to this point. I realized that the issue with the AI vows was just the tip of the iceberg. There were deeper problems in our relationship that we had been ignoring. As I reflected on our past, I remembered a conversation we had early in our relationship. He had mentioned that he had a hard time expressing his feelings and often felt inadequate when it came to romantic gestures. I had brushed it off at the time, thinking that it was something we could work through together. But now I realized that it was a bigger issue than I had thought. I also thought about my own insecurities and how they had played a role in our problems. I had always been someone who valued words and gestures, and I had put a lot of pressure on him to meet my expectations. In doing so, I had overlooked his own struggles and insecurities. After a month of being apart, we decided to meet and talk things through. It was a difficult conversation filled with tears and raw emotions. We both acknowledged our mistakes and the ways we had hurt each other. He apologized for his emotional affair with Jay, and I apologized for not being more understanding of his struggles. Despite our apologies, we both knew that our relationship had been irreparably damaged. The trust that had been broken was too much to rebuild. We decided to separate and take some time to focus on ourselves. It was a heartbreaking decision, but we both knew it was the right one. As we went our separate ways, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. I had invested so much in our relationship, and it was hard to let go. But I also knew that it was an opportunity for both of us to grow and learn from our mistakes. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my boyfriend I won't be a parent to his niece? Forever I, a 26-year-old woman, and my boyfriend of 5 years, who is 30 years old, recently had his niece placed with us due to her father's inability to care for her. We are both child-free by choice, and I have always made it clear to him that I don't want children of my own. However, we now find ourselves responsible for his niece, who has a learning disability and severe ADHD. I hate that we have to come home from work and teach her basic skills that her parents neglected to teach her. It's a major adjustment for both of us. I wanted it to be just the two of us, not us and a child. While I understand that my boyfriend did this out of goodwill, I am struggling with the situation. We recently went to court and her father's contesting everything. Drugs were found in both the child's system and her father's system. The child's mother is also incapable of caring for her due to work commitments and unstable housing. None of my boyfriend's family lives close to us, so there aren't any other suitable placements for the child. Our next court date is approaching, and everyone is asking us if we'll take permanent or long-term care of her. I am horrified by the thought of taking care of someone else's child forever. However, whenever I try to discuss the idea of talking to the child's mother about this situation, my boyfriend is reluctant. He believes that we are the best long-term option for his niece. I've tried discussing it with him, but he doesn't say much. I'm afraid that this situation will be a deal breaker, and he will break up with me. But I also don't want to be responsible for his niece forever. I feel that it wouldn't be a good fit for me in the long term, as I value my child-free lifestyle and have plans for my future. I would appreciate any advice on what to do and how to approach this situation. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You are not married. You need to tell the Department of Homeland Security workers and your boyfriend that you are not willing to raise a child. Now people are looking at you both as a package for raising the child. This is not remotely true, and the appropriate legal authorities need to know that yesterday. It is unfair to both you and the child if you stay. Your boyfriend needs to find someone willing to help him raise his niece. Good luck, if he truly wants to raise her too. If you are there at the next court date, you could end up legally bound. Tell people what you said here. Children are always deal breakers. It is what it is. Comment 2. You need to communicate that you're going to leave after this. He needs to know to plan to do this without you. Regardless, this relationship is over. He's committed to taking care of his niece. And even if he says no to save his relationship with you, the resentment and guilt he'll feel over doing so will be a poison to the relationship anyway. All that's left is to be honest with yourself, so you can be honest with him. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. So, after our last court date, things took a turn I didn't expect. We were granted temporary custody of my boyfriend's niece, and the judge set another hearing for a month later to determine long-term custody. My boyfriend was relieved, but I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, complicated process. The first few days were rough. We had to adjust our schedules to accommodate her needs, and it was exhausting. I found myself getting frustrated over the smallest things, like her inability to follow simple instructions, or her constant need for attention. My boyfriend tried to help, but he was just as overwhelmed as I was. We were both walking on thin ice, trying to keep our relationship intact while dealing with this new responsibility. One evening, I made a mistake that changed everything. I was so fed up with the situation that I blurted out, "I can't do this anymore. I never wanted kids, and now I'm stuck with someone else's child." My boyfriend's niece overheard me, and her face crumpled. She ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. My boyfriend looked at me with a mix of anger and disappointment. "How could you say that in front of her?" he asked, his voice trembling. I felt terrible. I tried to apologize, but the damage was done. The next few days were tense. My boyfriend and I barely spoke, and his niece avoided me as much as possible. I realized that my outburst had not only hurt her, but also put a strain on my relationship with my boyfriend. I knew I had to make things right, but I didn't know how. In the meantime, we had to deal with the fallout from my mistake. My boyfriend's niece started acting out more, refusing to do her homework and throwing tantrums over the smallest things. It was clear that she felt unwanted and unloved, and I couldn't blame her. I tried to be more patient and understanding, but it was hard. I was still struggling with my own feelings about the situation, and it was difficult to put them aside for her sake. One night, my boyfriend and I finally had a heart-to-heart. He told me that he understood how I felt, but that we needed to be a united front for his niece. He reminded me that she had been through a lot and needed stability and love. I knew he was right, but it was still hard to accept. I told him that I was willing to try, but that I needed his support. He promised to be there for me, and we agreed to work together to make things better for his niece. We started by setting up a routine for her, which helped a lot. We made sure she had a set bedtime, regular meals, and time for homework and play. We also enrolled her in a local support group for kids with learning disabilities and ADHD. It was a small step, but it made a big difference. She started to feel more secure and less anxious, and her behavior improved. As we settled into our new routine, I began to learn more about my boyfriend's niece and her background. Her father had been in and out of jail for drug-related offenses, and her mother had struggled with mental health issues. She had never had a stable home life, and it was clear that she had been neglected for most of her life. I started to feel a deep sense of empathy for her, and I realized that my initial resentment was misplaced. She wasn't a burden. She was a child in need of love and care. One day, while we were working on her homework, she looked up at me and said, "Thank you for helping me." It was such a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. I realized that I had the power to make a positive impact on her life, and that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to love her. But before I get to that, there was another issue we had to deal with. My boyfriend's family started to get involved, and it wasn't pretty. His parents, who lived out of state, called us and demanded to know why we hadn't consulted them before taking custody of his niece. They were furious and accused us of trying to cut them out of her life. My boyfriend tried to explain that we were just trying to do what was best for her, but they wouldn't listen. They threatened to take legal action to gain custody of her, which added even more stress to an already difficult situation. We decided to consult a lawyer to understand our options. The lawyer advised us to document everything and to be prepared for a legal battle. It was daunting, but we knew we had to protect my boyfriend's niece from being uprooted again. We started gathering evidence of her progress and the improvements in her behavior since she had been with us. It was a lot of work, but it gave us a sense of purpose and determination. In the midst of all this, I started to reflect on my own childhood. My parents had divorced when I was young, and I had been shuffled between them for years. I remembered the feeling of instability and how much it had affected me. I realized that my boyfriend's niece was going through something similar, and that I had the chance to give her the stability and love that I had craved as a child. It was a powerful realization, and it helped me to see her in a new light. As the court date approached, we were both nervous. We knew that the outcome would have a huge impact on all of our lives. We spent hours preparing our case and rehearsing what we would say in court. My boyfriend's niece was also anxious, and we did our best to reassure her that everything would be okay. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and we were a bundle of nerves. We presented our case to the judge, highlighting the progress that my boyfriend's niece had made since she had been with us. We also explained the challenges we had faced and how we had worked together to overcome them. It was a tense and emotional experience, but we felt that we had done our best. After what felt like an eternity, the judge made his decision. He granted us long-term custody of my boyfriend's niece, with the condition that we continued to provide her with the support and care she needed. It was a huge relief, and we were both overjoyed. My boyfriend's niece hugged us both, and I felt a sense of hope and optimism for the future. Thank you for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.